Everyone said I survived because I was lucky. But what they don't tell you is that surviving was the worst outcome. I hear that word a lot. Lucky. People say it with relief in their voices, like it's supposed to make everything better. It doesn't. Because luck doesn't feel like this. Luck doesn't wake you up at night with a weight on your chest. Luck doesn't make you wish you'd closed your eyes 1 second earlier. If I'm being honest, the day it happened didn't feel important at all. Felt normal. That's what scares me the most now. I woke up early that day, not because I had to, but because my body just wouldn't let me sleep anymore. I remember standing in the shower, staring at the wall longer than necessary, letting the water run, thinking about nothing important. I didn't know that was the last moment of peace I'd have for a long time, maybe forever. I was supposed to meet a group later that morning, people I barely knew, a shared obligation, nothing personal. There were 7 of us in total, all different lives, different reasons for being there. I didn't feel connected to them. That matters now more than I'd like to admit. We met at the pickup point just after sunrise. No jokes, no awkward introductions, just quiet acknowledgement. I remember noticing how calm everyone looked. Too calm, like we all believed we were in control. I almost didn't get in. That part replays in my head more than anything else. I stood there for maybe 2 seconds longer than normal, just enough time to question whether this was worth it. Then I stepped inside. The door closed behind me, and something inside my chest tightened. The road was empty. Too empty. Wide stretch of asphalt. Clear visibility. No warning. I remember thinking how strange it felt to be surrounded by people and still feel alone. We didn't see it coming. That's the truth. No dramatic build-up. No slow realization. Just impact. Sound vanished first. Then light. Then pressure. My body moved before my brain did. Thrown forward. Pulled sideways. Then nothing. I don't remember pain. That surprises people. I remember silence. Not peaceful silence. Empty silence. Like the world had paused without asking permission. I thought that was death. If that was it, it would have been easier. Then I woke up. The first thing I heard was someone crying. Not loudly. Controlled. That's how I knew something was wrong. My body felt heavy, like it didn't belong to me anymore. A doctor stood near the foot of the bed. He smiled when he saw my eyes open. That smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're very lucky," he said. There it was again. That word. I tried to ask about the others. My throat burned. My voice barely worked. The room went quiet. Too quiet. Someone placed a hand on my shoulder. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. That was when it hit me. I wasn't lucky. I was alone. They told me I survived because of where I was sitting, because of timing, because of chance. Everyone else didn't. All 6 of them. Gone. People kept telling me I was strong, that I was meant to live. I didn't feel strong. I felt spared, and I didn't understand why. That night, when the lights dimmed and the machines hummed quietly, I stared at the ceiling and wondered something I was afraid to admit. Why me? And that question would follow me long after my body healed. They discharged me a week later, not because I was fully healed, but because there was nothing more they could do for me. My body worked again. My mind didn't. People expected gratitude, smiles, relief. I gave them silence instead. They didn't understand that every step outside the hospital felt wrong, like I was trespassing in a life that wasn't meant for me anymore. At home, everything was exactly how I left it. That was the problem. Nothing acknowledged what had happened. The walls didn't know. The floor didn't care. I sat on my bed for hours, staring at the opposite wall, waiting for something to feel different. It never did. That night I didn't sleep, not because of pain, because my brain kept replaying the same question. Why did I live? The funerals happened quietly. 6 different families. 6 different rooms filled with grief. I attended 3 of them. That was all I could handle. No one knew what to say to me, and worse, they treated me like proof that things could have been different. Some looked at me with relief, others with quiet resentment, as if my breathing reminded them of what they lost. One woman hugged me too tightly and whispered, "You were spared," that word again. Like the others were punished. That was the first time I realized something terrible. Everyone believed survival was a gift, but no one asked what it cost. Started small. Food tasted dull. Music felt distant. Sounds lingered longer than they should. Voices echoed even after rooms emptied. I stopped answering messages. Not because I hated people, but because every conversation reminded me I wasn't supposed to be here. At night I felt watched, not by something supernatural, by expectation. I was expected to live well, to be grateful, to prove survival meant something. But the harder I tried to live normally, the more wrong it felt. 3 weeks later I received an email. No subject line, no greeting, just one sentence. "We're glad you made it." I stared at the words longer than I should have. My heart didn't race. It sank. I didn't recognize the sender. No company name. No signature. At first I assumed it was a mistake. A cruel coincidence. Then another message came the next day. Same sender. Different words. "You responded exactly as expected." That was when the air in the room felt heavy again. Just like the moment before the crash. Because no one should have expected anything from me, unless survival wasn't an accident. And that thought followed me into the night. The test begins to show its shape. I didn't reply to the email, not because I was brave, but because I didn't know how to respond to something that clearly knew me better than I knew myself. I closed the laptop and stood up, pacing the room like movement might shake the words loose from my head. Didn't. The message stayed with me all day. At the grocery store, on the bus, in the shower. "You responded exactly as expected." I kept replaying it, trying to understand what response they meant. I hadn't done anything. Or at least, I thought I hadn't. That night I checked my sent emails. Nothing unusual. No replies. No drafts. But something else caught my attention. An email I didn't remember opening. Dated the morning after the crash. It was empty. No subject. No text. Just opened. My hands felt cold. Because you don't open emails you don't remember receiving. And you definitely don't forget something like that. I tried to remember that morning. The hospital room. The beeping machines. The doctor's voice. There were gaps. Small at first, then wider the more I pushed. I remembered being awake before anyone else came in. Remembered the silence. But something felt edited. Like parts of that day had been removed, not forgotten. The next email came 2 days later. This time it had a subject line. Subject: Phase 1 complete. My stomach dropped, not because I understood what it meant, but because something inside me did. The message was longer this time. Still polite. Still calm. Too calm. Survival alone was not the test. Your reaction afterward was. You withdrew. You isolated. You questioned. That was the correct response. Correct response. As if my grief had been graded. The email ended with one line. The same line as before. "We're glad you made it." I shut the laptop and stood there, breathing slowly, trying not to panic. This wasn't random, and it wasn't new. I searched the news that night, not about the crash. I already knew those headlines by heart. I searched for survivors. There weren't many. Accidents like that don't leave many people behind. But I found 2. One was a woman from a fire several years ago. She was interviewed once, then never again. The other was a man who survived a structural collapse. He posted online for a while, then stopped. Both had one thing in common. They disappeared after people started calling them lucky. I checked comment sections, forums, obituaries. Nothing. It was like they'd been erased carefully. That was when I realized something important. Survival didn't make us special. It made us visible. The next message arrived exactly 1 week later. Same sender, different tone. Phase 2 begins now. Below it was an address, not far from where I lived. And one instruction: go alone. I sat there for a long time. I could ignore it, delete it, pretend none of this was real. Survival wasn't freedom. It was enrollment. I left the apartment just before dawn. Not because they told me when, but because something in me knew they'd be watching. The address led to a building with no sign, no name, no windows on the lower level. The door was unlocked. Of course it was. Inside, the air felt familiar, like the silence after the crash. That was when it finally clicked. This wasn't about whether I survived. This was about whether I could endure what came after. Why living longer was the worst outcome. The hallway inside the building was longer than it looked from outside. No doors, no signs, just a straight path forward. My footsteps echoed too loudly. Each step felt like an announcement. I considered turning back. That thought lasted less than a second, because something told me the choice had already been made. At the end of the hallway was a single room. The door was open, waiting. Inside, there was nothing dramatic. No machines, no restraints, no people, just a table and 2 chairs. One chair was empty, the other was facing it. I sat down without being told. That scared me more than anything else so far, because it meant part of me already understood the rules. A voice came from nowhere, not loud, not threatening, measured. You believe survival is an advantage, the voice said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. The voice continued. Most people do. That belief is what disqualifies them. The empty chair across from me slid backward on its own. Slowly, deliberately. Someone sat down. I couldn't see them, but I felt the weight. Those who died, the voice said, completed their role. The words hit harder than any accusation, because they didn't sound cruel. They sounded factual. What role? I asked. My voice barely carried. The unseen presence leaned forward. I felt colder. They ended, the voice said. You continued. That difference is the test. The voice explained it calmly. No emotion, no apology. Certain people respond to trauma differently. Some break, some disappear inward. Those people are not saved. They are selected. You didn't fight, the voice said. You didn't rage. You withdrew. You questioned whether survival was deserved. That made you compatible. I felt sick, not because I was afraid, but because it finally made sense. The others didn't fail. They were spared. Living longer, the voice said, reveals more. Pain doesn't end. It accumulates. Most people are not meant to carry that weight. I thought of the funerals, the quiet grief, the finality. They were finished. I wasn't. You will continue, the voice said, under observation. Your life will resume. But every loss, every failure, every quiet regret, you will feel it fully. That is the purpose. I finally asked the question that had been burning in me. Can I refuse? There was a pause, longer than before. Yes, the voice said. My chest loosened. You already tried, the voice continued, and you're still here. That was the moment I understood. Survival wasn't luck. It wasn't reward. It was responsibility without consent. The chair across from me slid back again. The presence left. The door behind me opened. I was free to go. I stepped outside as the sun rose. The world looked the same. That was the cruelest part. Because now I knew. Living wasn't mercy. Ending was. I thought the worst part would be leaving that building. I was wrong. The street looked normal. Cars passed. People walked. Someone laughed into a phone nearby. Life continued as if nothing had changed. That normalcy felt like mockery, because I knew something they didn't. I wasn't free. I was released. For the first few days, nothing obvious happened. No emails. No instructions. No signs. That silence was deliberate. I could feel it. Every sound felt louder. Every moment felt measured. I became careful in ways I couldn't explain. How long I stayed outside. What I said to people. How much I revealed. Not because I was afraid of punishment, but because I understood the rules now. It started with small coincidences. Too small to accuse. Too consistent to ignore. I'd think about someone and they'd call. I'd change my routine, and something would redirect me back. Once, I skipped a bus I usually took. It broke down 10 minutes later. Another time, I stayed home instead of going out. A fight broke out where I would have been. None of it was dramatic. That was the point. It felt like reality itself was gently steering me, not saving me, positioning me. People noticed the change before I did. They said I was calmer, more reserved, different. They thought the trauma had matured me. They were wrong. Trauma had hollowed me out. What remained was compliance. I stopped taking risks, not consciously, instinctively. Something inside me rejected danger now, like my body knew it wasn't allowed to end yet. That realization made me sick, because it meant survival had rewired me. Pain didn't hit all at once. It stacked. Small disappointments lingered longer. Losses echoed louder. I remembered every regret with perfect clarity. Sleep stopped being rest. It became review. Every night, my mind replayed moments I couldn't fix. I understood then what the voice meant. Pain accumulates. There was no release valve, no breaking point, just endurance. I thought about the others often, the ones who died. They didn't have to carry this. They didn't have to feel the slow erosion. They were complete. I was ongoing. That envy scared me, because it felt like truth. The email returned without warning. No subject, just one line. You're adjusting well. I didn't feel relief. I felt exposed. They weren't watching my actions. They were watching my endurance. How much I could carry. How long I could continue. That was the test. Not survival. Persistence. When endurance breaks, I used to think endurance meant strength. That as long as I could keep going, I was winning. But endurance is just pain stretched across time. And time does not heal what it keeps reopening. The days started blending together. Not because they were busy, because nothing inside me reacted anymore. Food tasted flat. Music sounded distant. Laughter felt borrowed. I was alive in the technical sense, but I wasn't present. My body started betraying me, hands shaking for no reason, heart racing without fear, exhaustion that sleep couldn't touch. Doctors called it stress. They suggested rest. They suggested therapy. None of them understood the problem. Rest only made it louder. Silence gave the weight room to breathe. I began documenting everything, every coincidence, every near miss, every redirected moment. That's when the pattern became undeniable. I was never allowed to be at the center of anything. Danger passed near me. Loss brushed against me, but never landed fully. I wasn't being protected. I was being preserved. The next email came weeks later, longer this time. Most people believe survival is the reward. It isn't. Survival is the condition. I felt something crack when I read that. Not fear. Recognition. They weren't testing courage. They weren't testing morality. They were measuring how long a person could live without relief. I finally understood why the others died. Not because they were weak, but because they reached an end. They felt everything fully. Grief, love, fear, hope. Their stories concluded. Mine was forced to continue. Survival wasn't mercy. It was assignment. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. No scream. No collapse. It was a decision. I stopped adjusting. I walked into situations I'd been subtly guided away from. Nothing catastrophic happened. That was the confirmation. The system reacted instead. The email came immediately. Deviation detected. That's when I knew. This wasn't about keeping me alive. It was about keeping me unchanged. You can't escape something that lives inside your reactions. Even now, the pull exists, the subtle steering, the quiet correction. Survival trained my instincts, and instincts are hard to unlearn. Some people die young. Some people live long. Neither is fair. But some people survive when they shouldn't. And that comes with a cost no one talks about. Because living too long inside pain doesn't make you strong. It makes you quiet. And quiet people are easy to observe. I don't know if the test ever ends. I only know this. Surviving wasn't my reward. It was my sentence. And if you're listening to this, still here, still carrying things you thought would have killed you, you might not be lucky either. You might just be enduring.